You talked about broken Britain and fixing it. You haven't. It's more broken now than it was.
That is the Britain this broken system has created.
Britain is broken.
Britain is broken.
Look at this map for plans to build a megatunnel under the River Thames. The project was given the green light in March this year, but planning started in 2009. That's 16 years in the making. But here's the wild part. The project has spent £1.2 billion of UK taxpayers' money just on planning. That's £205,000 a day, not for shovels in the ground, or concrete being poured, or tarmac being laid, just the paperwork. Compare this to the world's longest tunnel in Norway, which cost £84 million to build. That's 14 times less than the Lower Thames crossing. And remember, we're comparing the planning of a tunnel in the UK to actually building one in Norway. So what's going on here? And why does this example give many British people the gut feeling that something isn't quite right and that the foundations of their country are broken? Let's find out. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Dr. Vinay Raniga, a former political leadership scholar at the University of Oxford. I help spread ideas that build nations and help people live better lives. In this video, we're talking about why it feels like the UK is falling behind, and importantly, what can we do about it? So I came across this fascinating report called Foundations by Ben Southwood, Samuel Hughes and Sam Bowman, and we're going to use it as the backbone to this video. It's one of the clearest, boldest explanations I've seen for why the UK economy has stagnated and what we can do to fix it. Let's start where Britain is today. Before we talk about what's broken, to be clear, this video is not a rant to talk down the country. Britain is a country of immense achievement. For most of modern history, it led the world in wealth, health and education. It pioneered the scientific revolution, launched the industrial revolution, and built some of the most advanced housing and infrastructure of its time. Its institutions, courts, parliaments, universities were models of liberalism copied around the world. Relative to its size and resources, no other country has achieved so much for so long with so little. And many of these strengths have endured. Britons value diverse thinking, debate and accountable institutions. They respect science, the rule of law and independent judgment. In moments of global crises like the invasion of Ukraine, the British public has shown remarkable unity and moral clarity. But let's look at the facts. Real wages in Britain have been flat for 16 years. Today, the average weekly wage is just 0.8% higher than it was in 2008. For the average full-time worker, annual wages are 6.9% lower than in the same time period. Meanwhile, productivity, that is the value people produce per hour they work, has badly lagged. Between 2019 and 2023, UK productivity grew by just 1.5%. In the same period, the US grew by 7.6% and France and Germany 15 to 18%, and Poland, once far behind, grew by nearly 30% from 2010 to 2019. On current trends, it will overtake the UK before the decade's out. These aren't just numbers. Lower productivity means lower wages, less investment and weaker public services. If the UK had continued to grow at the same rate between 1979 to 2008, would be almost 25% more productive than today. That means the typical family would be around £9,000 better off per year. Public finances would also be transformed. Instead of being in a deficit of around 90 billion, would be in a surplus of 170 billion. So what went wrong? Many explanations have been offered, but most missed the mark. Labour blames a lack of government strategy and rising inequality. Some economists say that the UK's growth model is flawed because it relies too much on private capital and not enough on state-led investment. But these proposals ignore the reality. Any investment, public or private, still runs into the same broken systems that block and delay building. Others cite demographic shifts and aging populations or falling birth rates as a reason for slower growth. Some argue that stagnation is just what happens in service-led economies. And yes, the 2010s brought shock after shock after shock. A sluggish post-financial crisis recovery, Brexit and the COVID-19 pandemic were huge for the country. But none of these fully explain why countries facing the same problems like France, Germany or the US have still managed to grow. the foundation reports to one root cause. Britain has blocked investment in the very things that make economies grow: housing, infrastructure, and energy. No new runway at Heathrow in 20 years. No nuclear power station completed since 1995. No new reservoir since 1992, although our population has grown by 10 million. Without infrastructure, housing, and energy, businesses can't expand, talent can't move, and costs stay high. That's why Britain isn't growing, and we're falling behind. You will never think that France is more productive than the UK. In popular culture, like watching Emily in Paris, when you think of France, you think of sky-high taxes, a workforce that takes 2-hour lunches.
Has anyone noticed this is a very dysfunctional workplace?
It's powerful unions with their yellow vests. Well, strikes are so common in French unions that they've designed special barbecues that fit the tram tracks so they can grill sausages while they march. And let's do the maths. To pay a French worker 61,000 euros after tax, a company has to shell out 138,000 euros. This is due to massive employer-side taxes. In Britain, to deliver the same take-home pay, a company spends just 98,000 euros. That's a 40% saving. And yet, French workers are more productive than British ones, even closer to the Americans. Why? Because France invests in the foundations of a productive economy: housing, transport, and energy. France has 7 million more homes than Britain, despite having the same population. Paris has tripled in size since 1945. London? It's barely grown. France builds where people want to live, prosperous cities and holiday regions. Britain blocks development in these areas. France has 29 tram networks, Britain has 7. France has 6 metro systems, Britain has 3. France has nearly 2,000 miles of high-speed rail, Britain has 67. France has 12,000 kilometers of motorway, Britain has 4,000. They've even built more motorway in 25 years than Britain has in total, and they drive 10 miles per hour faster than us. France gets 70% of its electricity from nuclear power. It's clean, abundant, and reliable. We haven't built a station in around 30 years. So France can avoid its big state, its unions, its 2-hour lunches, because it's built the physical foundations of prosperity. Britain, meanwhile, blocks the very investments we need the most. Now, here's the real kicker. In 2022, France invested 26% of its GDP into physical capital. Germany, 25%. The OECD averaged 23%. The UK, just 19%. We didn't stop investing because we're short-sighted. We stopped because we banned the most valuable types of investment. Houses people want, infrastructure cities need, energy systems that work. Instead, we've piled cost on top of cost in planning, in tax, and in regulatory gridlock. That's why private investment, which makes up 80% of total investment in the UK, making it more important than what the government does, has stalled. Investment isn't the cherry on the cake or an afterthought the government needs to think of. It is the cake. And without it, there's nothing to grow. The lack of housing is the biggest block for Britain's economic growth. Since 1947, our planning system has become one of the most restrictive in the world. Before that, cities like Manchester, Liverpool, and Cardiff exploded, growing by over 1,000% in a century as people moved to follow jobs and new industries sprung up. And it worked. During the 1930s, Britain's housing stock nearly doubled in just 20 years. Homes were bigger, living standards soared, wages equalized between regions because people could move where the opportunity was. But then, fresh off the war in 1947, Britain introduced the Town and Country Planning Act, and everything changed. It was part of a sweeping nationalisation programme. Steel, road haulage, and even local trades brought under state control. Top rates of tax, over 90%. But the biggest long-term impact for housing was planning. Before 1947, councils had to compensate landowners if they blocked development. That gave them a reason to say yes. The new law, it scrapped that. Now councils could block new homes without paying a penny. It also stripped councils of rewards of saying yes. Local tax revenues from development were clawed back by central government, so the incentives were gone from both ends. And then came the killer, a 100% development tax. If your land gained value because of planning permission, you had to hand all of it, yes, all of it, back to Whitehall. And perhaps most famously, the Act gave legal force to what became greenbelts, vast rings of land around cities where building is almost nearly always banned. Overnight, we moved from you can build unless told otherwise to a system where you can't build until we say so. And mostly, they say no. The result is, since 1947, private house building has never returned to Victorian levels. We've stopped people moving to the best paying cities, and when they try, prices shoot up. Take London, for example. 40% of homes in Islington are socially rented. The same is true for Camden, Southwark and Tower Hamlets. This means some of the most valuable land in Britain is locked up by tenants who can't move even when their needs change because they'll lose their housing. The result? London has become a city for the very rich and the very subsidised. The middle, which usually have the skills for growth, is priced out. And it's not just in London. The planning gridlock stretches across the southeast. Shortages in Cambridge, Oxford, and even York up north means that demand spills into towns like Peterborough, Northampton, and Bristol, pushing up prices everywhere. This isn't just a housing crisis. It's a productivity crisis. If people can't move to where the better jobs are, companies can't scale, and the economic centre of gravity can't grow. Even those lucky enough to live in high-wage cities are less productive than they could be because employers can't hire the support staff they need. It's no joke to say if we had this system in the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution would have never happened. And the problem isn't just housing. The same rules apply for factories, labs, offices, and shops. We've blocked a £750 million film studio by a dual carriageway. We've blocked a £2.5 billion data centre just off the M25. And Cambridge, a biotech powerhouse, lab space is so scarce that it's even more expensive than residential rent. Everywhere Britain has a chance to lead, we hold back. Until we fix housing, we won't fix growth. And without growth, we can't fix anything else. Let me tell you a secret. Britain used to be the best in the world at developing infrastructure. In the 18th century, we had over 22,000 miles of tolled roads and 4,000 miles of canals that were all built by private companies. In the 19th century, we built the most impressive railway system on Earth. In fact, we had twice as many rail miles in 1914 as we do today. And we weren't just ahead, we were decades ahead. London Underground, hate it or love it, opened in 1863. That's 40 years before Paris, Berlin or New York even built their first metro lines. And the word metro literally comes from the Metropolitan line. Fast forward today and we're lagging badly. Take the Elizabeth line. It costs 18.1 billion just for one section. That's 1.4 billion pounds per mile, making it the second most expensive metro in the world. Compare that to Madrid. It's 68 million pounds per mile. Copenhagen, 350 million pounds per mile, not billion. The Jubilee line is also cheaper even with gold-plated stations. This cost bloat kills projects even before they start. And Leeds is the largest city in the world without a metro system. Why is this the case? Legal delays, endless reviews, and gold-plated designs are all symptoms of a system where no one's accountable for cost control. Compare this to the past. In the 1800s, if a project was in the national interest, Parliament passed a short act giving that company power to build. Planning took months, not decades. So why did we stop this? In the 1990s, infrastructure has been centralised by the national government. This means no one close to the project is on the hook for if the costs bloat. And when no one pays, no one saves. Private companies used to have skin in the game, and local councils used to cut costs to keep rates low. Now, Whitehall can burn through £1.2 billion just in planning and no voter notices. Projects get blocked not because they're bad, but because they're unaffordable under Britain's broken system. And the knock-on effects? Slower commutes, smaller job markets and weaker businesses. A 10% increase in commuter speed boosts labour markets by 15 to 18%. A 10% increase in accessible jobs raises productivity by 2.4%. Britain is leaving growth on the table every single day. And this hits real people. Take Cambridge, for example. The Global Innovation Index ranks Cambridge as the most intensive science and technological cluster in the world. We're literally winning in this area. However, without new reservoirs, new housing in Cambridge is literally illegal, which kills growth in our world-leading biotech sector. No infrastructure means no homes. No homes means no workers. And no workers means no innovation. And that's how we choke our economy. This isn't just an infrastructure problem. It's a national productivity crisis. Until Britain fixes how we build, we won't grow. And if we don't grow, we'll again fall further behind. Britain once had a superpower, not militarily, not financial, energy. In 1640, Britain was mining 1.5 million tons of coal a year, more than 3 times the rest of Europe combined. This coal fired not just engines, but industries. Salt, soap, textiles, brick, glass, metalwork. They all surged thanks to cheap, abundant energy. We fed more people, raised more animals, and even grew taller, literally. By the 1700s, Brits were 5 centimeters taller than the French as they ate 600 more calories. Why? Because we could grow and transport more food. We were the first energy superpower, and it built our dominance. But the age of coal came at a cost: lung disease, killer smogs, and environmental devastation. So in 1956, we led again, launching the first commercial nuclear power station. Check this out. By 1965, Britain had more nuclear reactors than the rest of the world combined. Had we just kept up that pace, half of our electricity today would come from nuclear. Instead, nuclear output has halved and energy costs are now higher than any point in the past century. Let's look at the numbers. Since 2004, the price of industrial electricity in the UK has risen 153%, and that's inflation adjusted. In 2021, large UK manufacturers paid double than what their French counterparts pay. The results? Steel production has dropped by 75% in 20 years. We've shut down fertilizer plants, and it's not just industry. Data centers, the backbone of the AI revolution and the internet, need massive amounts of power. Some use more electricity than 300,000 homes. And still, we block new data center sites, even while AI explodes. Worse, we failed to build enough new energy capacity. 75% of our energy still comes from gas and oil. But as we electrify everything from cars to heating to cooling, demand is about to surge. Switching to electric vehicles alone costs an increased power demand of 40%. So what's the plan? Britain has leaned in hard to intermittent renewables, mainly wind and solar. But here's the truth. Renewables need 10 billion in annual subsidies just to stay afloat. Transmission costs have tripled since 2008 and are projected to hit 54 billion by 2030. Grid balancing, managing supply and demand minute by minute, will soon cost 4 billion per year. Backup generation for low wind weeks add billions more. The result? Bills are rising even as we build more cheap renewables. Why? Because clean doesn't mean reliable. Wind and solar can't be switched on at will, and the whole grid has to be rebuilt around them. That's a problem. And that's why we need to look at nuclear again. Unlike wind and solar, nuclear provides constant, zero carbon electricity, day and night, winter and summer. France gets 2/3 of its electricity from nuclear. Britain, just 12.5%, and it's falling. We've shut 8 reactors in the past 3 decades and built none. Why? Because they're too expensive. Britain's nuclear construction costs are the second highest in the world. But not because the tech is expensive, but because our system is broken. Sizewell C had to submit a 44,000-page environmental report. That's 30 times longer than the complete works of Shakespeare. Hinkley Point C took 10 years just to start construction. Meanwhile, South Korea builds reactors at 1/6 the cost because they're building in fleets and learning by doing. They're now building nuclear plants in the UAE at half the cost of Britain's. So here's the choice. We can spend billions more on subsidies and sticking plaster politics. Or we can fix the rules, streamline approvals, and even call KEPCO, the South Korean company, to ask how fast they can start. We once led the world in energy, but we've lost that lead. But with the right choices, we could get it back and become an industrial powerhouse again. Without abundant, reliable, clean and cheap energy, there is no growth, there is no AI boom, there is no green revolution, and Britain will stay stuck. Look, Britain doesn't need to reinvent itself. We already have some of the most important ingredients: a deep respect for law, a thriving scientific tradition, and a culture of debate, risk-taking, and reinvention. The problem isn't a lack of ideas or money, it's that the state has blocked the very investments that drive growth. Homes, railways, power plants, labs. And the solution is simple: just unblock them. And history proves that we can. In the 1930s, after war, inflation, economic stagnation, Britain still boomed. Not through state spending, but removing the barriers to private investment. We built millions of homes, extended the railways, and even rolled out the national electricity grid in just 5 years. We became the most electrified country in the world, and we can do it again. If we free up the private sector to build homes, transport, energy, and industry, we unlock a surge of jobs, innovation, and capital into our country. Cheaper energy means more manufacturing. More homes means better wages and stronger families. And stronger infrastructure means faster commutes, higher productivity, and new industries. We don't need a new identity. We need foundations that let Britain be Britain again. We've done it before and we can do it again. So let's get Britain building. Hey friends, thanks so much for watching this video. My channel is about ideas that build nations and help people live better lives. If you found this interesting, please drop a comment below and hit that subscribe button. It really does help me build this YouTube channel and I would love you to do so. Thank you so much and I'll see you in the next one.